In the quiet glow of the firelight, let us travel back many centuries to a world that feels both distant and familiar. Imagine the Middle Ages, stretching roughly from the 5th century to the 15th, 1,000 years where lives were lived slowly, steadily, under the cycle of the seasons and beneath the watchful gaze of the church, the village, and the land itself. Life then was different in so many ways, yet filled with rhythms and concerns that we can still understand. Tonight, I will take you gently into that world, exploring not only what people did, but also how they felt, what they feared, and what gave them comfort as they moved through their days. Picture first the medieval village. At dawn, the first sounds you might hear will be the cockerel crowing, breaking the silence of night. The village would stir gradually. Smoke would begin to rise from thatched cottages as fires were rekindled to prepare bread or porridge. People lived in small wooden or wattle and daub houses, often with only 1 or 2 rooms, where family members and sometimes their animals shared the same space. The scent would smoke mixed with the damp air of the morning, and life began again with the tasks of survival. A peasant's day was full of labor. Most of the population lived from the land, tied to the soil through a system we call feudalism. Under this system, the lord of the manor owned the land, but peasants or serfs worked it in exchange for protection and a small portion of food for their families. Imagine the fields stretching outward, strips of land divided among families, with oxen pulling the plow and men, women, and children bending down to sow or harvest grain. Their tools were simple, often wooden with iron tips, but they knew the land well and respected its cycles. Life was hard, yes, but it was also structured, with each day bringing familiar duties. Food was simple, and for peasants, it was rarely varied. The staple of life was bread, made from barley or rye. Sometimes wheat at the harvest had been generous. Alongside bread, there might be pottage, a thick stew made from whatever vegetables were available. Onions, beans, leeks, maybe cabbage. Meat was rare for most villagers, reserved more often for special feasts or holidays. Instead, they ate cheese, eggs, and sometimes fish if a river or pond was nearby. Salt was precious, needed to preserve food through the long winters, and honey was a treasured sweetness, gathered from bees when the summer sun was strong. Meals were eaten from wooden bowls with wooden spoons, often shared among family members. Life was modest, but there was comfort in the familiarity of the table, in the fire that warmed both the body and the spirit. As the sun rose higher, villagers would gather for their tasks. Women often spun wool, brewed ale, or tended small gardens near their cottages. Children helped where they could, scaring birds from fields or fetching water from the well. Men might mend fences, care for livestock, or work under command of the Lord Steward. And through it all, the rhythm of bells from the village church rang out across the fields. The church was the center of life in the Middle Ages, not only as a place of worship, but as a hub for community. Its bells marked time, matins in the early morning, vespers in the evening. Births, marriages, and deaths were all bound by the rites of the church, which offered meaning and explanation in a world often full of uncertainty. Imagine the church interior, cool and dim, with light filtering through narrow windows of colored glass. Candles flickered before statues and crosses. The scent of incense lingered, a reminder of prayer and reverence. For people who could not read or write, which was most of the population, the images on the walls told sacred stories. Saints, angels, and miracles painted to remind them of a world beyond their toil. Faith was both comfort and fear. The promise of heaven soothed weary hearts, while the threat of sin and purgatory urged obedience. Life was fragile, and death was never far away, so faith gave structure to uncertainty. Let us pause and imagine an evening in the village. After a long day in the fields, families would return to their cottages. The fire in the hearth was the center of life, both for cooking and for warmth. They might gather around, eating simple bread and broth, while telling stories. Some stories were of saints and miracles. Others were older. Folk tales passed from generation to generation. Laughter might be heard. Children playing in the glow of the flames, before gradually falling asleep near their parents. Outside, the world was quiet, with only the sound of animals settling down for the night and the rustle of trees in the wind. Stars stretched above, clear and brilliant, reminding them of the vastness of creation. Life was humble, but it was full of connections between family, neighbors, land, and faith. Of course, not all people lived like peasants. In the towns, life had a different rhythm. Towns grew slowly during the Middle Ages, clustered around castles, monasteries, or trade routes. Within their walls, narrow streets twisted between houses and shops. Merchants sold cloth, spices, or tools. Bakers baked loaves in communal ovens, while blacksmiths hammered iron into horseshoes or nails. The marketplace bustled with voices, bargaining over prices, news spreading from traveler to traveler. For those in towns, opportunities for wealth and craft were greater, though risks were as well. Fires could spread quickly among wooden houses. Disease often lingered where people crowded together. Yet towns were also places of learning, where guilds were formed, universities began, and ideas slowly traveled. Castles, too, were part of this world, rising from hills or guarding rivers. Castles were centers of power and defense. Imagine approaching a castle in the 12th century. High stone walls, towers rising above, a drawbridge crossing a moat. Inside, courtyards echoed with the clatter of horses and the calls of guards. The lord and his family lived in the great hall, where meals were taken beneath wooden beams, and tapestries hung on the walls to keep out the chill. Meals for nobles were far richer than for peasants. Roasted meats, spice sauces, fine bread, and imported wine. Yet even here, life was not always comfortable. Castles were cold, drafty, and full of smoke. Still, they symbolized power, and within their walls, nobles planned wars, marriages, and alliances. Knights were part of this noble world, trained from boyhood to fight on horseback. As pages, they learned manners and service. As squires, they trained in weapons, until they were knighted in ceremonies that pledged loyalty to lord and church. Chivalry, the code of honor, demanded bravery, courtesy, and protection of the weak, though reality often fell short of the ideal. Tournaments brought excitement, with justs and contests of skill, while battles brought the harsh reality of medieval war. Armor clashing, arrows flying, villages burned in the path of armies. For common people, war was often destruction rather than glory. Yet stories of knights became legends that still echo today. Education in the Middle Ages was rare for most, but it existed. Monasteries preserved learning, with monks copying manuscripts by hand in scriptoria, keeping alive the words of ancient writers. Later, universities began in cities like Bologna, Paris, and Oxford, where scholars debated philosophy, law, and theology. Latin was a language of learning, a link to the past. For ordinary villagers, knowledge was passed orally, through stories, songs, and traditions. Wisdom about the land, the seasons, and healing herbs was preserved not in books, but in memory and practice. Medicine was a mixture of experience and belief. Illness was common, and doctors used herbs, charms, and sometimes bloodletting to treat patients. Many believed sickness came from imbalances of the body's humors or from spiritual causes. Plagues could sweep through communities with devastating speed, leaving fear and sorrow behind. Yet even in sickness, people found comfort in prayer, in the presence of loved ones, and in small remedies that gave hope. As the centuries passed, life slowly changed. Trade expanded, towns grew, kings consolidated power, and the medieval world moved toward what we now call the Renaissance. But for centuries, daily life remained steady, bound to the land, the church, and the cycles of nature. It was a world of hardship, yes, but also of resilience, where people found joy in festivals, love in families, and meaning in faith. Tonight, as we imagine this medieval world, let's not see only the struggles, but also the humanity. Imagine the laughter of children playing in the fields, the quiet prayers whispered in candlelight, the shared bread passed from hand to hand, the stories told beside the fire. These moments remind us that, though centuries separate us, people then dreamed, feared, and loved in ways not so different from our own. So let the flickering fire calm your thoughts. Picture the stone walls of a distant castle, the winding streets of a medieval town, the humble cottages of a village. Hear the bells ring out over the fields, marking the passage of another day. And as you rest, let these stories of the past ease you gently into sleep, a reminder that across time, people have always sought comfort, meaning, and peace beneath the same night sky. As we drift further into this world of the Middle Ages, let us look more closely at the ways people marked time, celebrated life, and found meaning beyond work. The medieval year was not just measured in days of toil, but in festivals and holy days that gave rhythm and joy to the passing of the seasons. For people who worked hard in fields or workshops, these moments of celebration were precious, like lanterns glow in the long corridors of life. The calendar of the Middle Ages was filled with feast days, days when ordinary labor paused and the community gathered in celebration. Nearly every month had some festival, tied either to the turning of the seasons or to the memory of saints. Christmas, of course, was central, lasting not just one day but 12, with feasting, carols, and sometimes plays performed in the village square. Candles glowed in churches, and the story of Christ's birth was retold with reverence and joy. Epiphany followed, marking the visit of three kings, and people often exchanged small gifts. Easter was even greater, celebrating resurrection and new life. Lent before was a time of fasting, of abstaining from meat and rich foods, and of turning inward toward prayer. Then at Easter, bells rang out in jubilation, and tables were filled once again with feasts. After long weeks of restraint, the joy of celebration was heightened, reminding people of the rhythm of sacrifice and renewal. Other festivals reflected older seasonal patterns. May Day, for example, brought dancing around a maypole, the crowning of May Queen, and songs sung to welcome summer. Midsummer was marked with bonfires, believed to drive away evil spirits and protect crops. Harvest festivals gave thanks for the grain safely gathered, with bread baked from the first sheaves. Michaelmas, in late September, was another time of celebration, with goose feasts and gatherings to mark the turning of the year toward winter. Imagine yourself in such a festival. The village square fills with people dressed in their best clothing. Minstrels play lutes or fiddles, while drums keep rhythm for dancing. Children laugh as they chase each other through the crowd. Tables are set out with bread, cheese, roasted meats, and ale brewed fresh for the occasion. The air is filled with warmth and voices, the worries of daily life set aside, if only for a day. For peasants and lords alike, these festivals gave joy, a chance to rest, to eat, to laugh, and to remember that life was more than toil. Music was everywhere in the Middle Ages. Though most instruments were simple, they brought comfort and beauty. The harp, the lute, the recorder, and the hurdy-gurdy were played in courts and towns, while bagpipes, drums, and fiddles were more common among the people. Songs told of love, of heroes, of saints, and of history. Troubadours in southern France and minzingers in Germany sang poetry to noble patrons, while wandering minstrels carried news and stories from village to village. Imagine sitting by the fire, listening to the gentle strumming of a lute, the melody rising softly as the night deepens. Music calmed weary hearts and gave voice to emotions too deep for words. Clothing, too, told a story. For peasants, clothing was simple: wool tunics for men, long woolen dresses for women, cloaks for warmth, and leather shoes. The colors were often muted, browns, grays, and greens, though sometimes brighter dyes were used when they could be afforded. For the wealthy, Clothing was a mark of status. Nobles wore rich fabrics like silk or velvet, dyed in deep colors like crimson, blue, and gold. Women of wealth wore gowns with flowing sleeves, and men wore tunics trimmed with fur. Hats and headdresses became more elaborate as the centuries passed, with tall hennons, cone-shaped hats, becoming fashionable among noble women in the later Middle Ages. Every stitch, every thread, told of one's place in society. Yet beyond the surface of appearance, clothing also gave warmth and comfort in a world where winters were long and cold. Picture a family huddled together in a cottage, wrapped in cloaks and blankets, the fire burning low as the wind howls outside. Clothing was not just a marker of wealth. It was a shield against the elements, a daily necessity for survival. Education, though rare, slowly spread as centuries passed. In monasteries, young boys might be taught to read Latin, learning through scripture and psalms. In towns, cathedral schools grew into universities, where students gathered to debate. Imagine a medieval scholar in a dimly lit room, parchment spread before him, ink and quill in hand. He bends over a text, carefully copying words in neat, rounded script. Each book took months, even years to complete, and was a treasure of knowledge. The pages might be illuminated with gold leaf and bright pigments, turning words into art. To hold such a book was to hold wisdom itself, preserved for future generations. Yet most learning for ordinary people came not from books, but from experience. A child growing up in a village learned to sow seeds, to gather firewood, to tend animals, all by watching parents and neighbors. Knowledge was practical, tied to the seasons and the earth. Midwives passed on wisdom about childbirth. Healers shared knowledge of herbs. Stories told by the fire taught moral lessons, warnings, and values. Memory was the great library of the people. The medieval home, whether cottage or castle, was shaped by this blend of necessity and tradition. In a peasant cottage, floors were often made of packed earth, strewn with rushes that were changed when they grew dirty. Furniture was sparse, a wooden table, benches, perhaps a chest for storage. Beds were simple, sometimes just straw mattresses, shared by parents and children. Smoke often lingered in the air, as chimneys were not always common. Yet the home was a place of safety, of warmth, where a family gathered together. In castles, life was more complex, yet not always more comfortable. The great hall was the heart of the castle, where meals were taken and where people gathered. Fires burned in large hearths, but the stone walls were cold and drafts crept in through every crack. Tapestries helped insulate the rooms, while also telling stories of battles, hunts, and legends. Servants bustled about, carrying food from the kitchens, maintaining the Lord's household, caring for guests. At night, candles lit the hall, casting flickering shadows on the walls. For all their grandeur, castles were places of constant activity, with little privacy, noise echoing from one chamber to another. Let us step into a medieval kitchen. The air is filled with the scent of roasting meat, herbs, and smoke. Pots hang over the fire, while spits turn slowly. Bread bakes in ovens and ale ferments in barrels. The cooks are busy, preparing meals for dozens, even hundreds, of people in great households. Ingredients came from both near and far. Spices like cinnamon, pepper, and saffron were prized imports, while local gardens provided herbs like parsley, sage, and thyme. Meals were feasts of the senses, especially for the wealthy, though for the poor, they remained humble and plain. Daily life also carried dangers. Fire was a constant risk, especially in wooden towns. Illness could strike without warning, and the Black Death in the 14th century showed just how fragile life was. The plague swept across Europe, carried by fleas on rats, leaving devastation in its path. Entire villages were emptied, fields left untended, and grief settled over the land. In such moments, people turned even more to faith, to prayer, and to rituals that gave them hope. Though fear was great, Resilience was greater, and life, though changed, continued. War, too, was a shadow over the Middle Ages. Lords clashed for power, kings sought to expand their lands, and armies marched across fields. For peasants, this often meant destruction, as crops were burned, livestock taken, and homes destroyed. Yet even in war there were codes. Truces were called on holy days, and churches were often spared as sanctuaries. Knights dreamed of honor, though reality was harsh. Banners flew above the battlefield, the clash of swords and the cries of men filling the air. For those left behind, war was remembered in stories, songs, and prayers for peace. Still, the Middle Ages were not only hardship. There was love, courtship, and family life. Weddings were important occasions, bringing families and communities together. Though marriages among nobles were often arranged for alliances, among peasants they were usually based on affection and practicality. A wedding feast might last for days with music, dancing, and laughter. Children followed, filling cottages with energy and joy, though also with the burdens of care. Childhood was shorter then. Children soon took on responsibilities, but play was never absent. Simple games with sticks, balls, or bones brought laughter, while songs and rhymes passed the time. Travel was rare for most, but not impossible. Pilgrimages were common, journeys made to holy shrines across Europe. Pilgrims walked for days, weeks, even months, wearing badges or carrying staffs as signs of their devotion. Along the way, they met strangers, heard new stories, and saw new lands. For some, pilgrimage was an act of penance. For others, a quest for healing. Reaching the shrine, whether of St. James in Compostela or St. Thomas in Canterbury, brought a sense of awe and accomplishment. Pilgrimages connected the local to universal, linking humble villagers to the great currents of faith across Christendom. The night sky of the Middle Ages was the same sky we see now, though seen with fewer lights to dim the stars. Imagine standing in a quiet field, looking up at the constellations shining bright and clear. For medieval people, the heavens were full of meaning. Astrology was often studied, linking the positions of stars to human fate. The church taught that the heavens reflected divine order. The moon marked time for planting and harvesting, and the stars guided travelers on long journeys. The sky was both mystery and map, a reminder of how small human life was beneath the vastness of creation. As you rest now, picture the gentle close of a medieval day. The bells ring vespers, the evening prayer, as the sun sets behind the hills. Villagers return home, their tools set aside. Fires are lit, and the scent of cooking fills the air. In the castle, the great hall prepares for supper, torches blazing along the walls. Minstrels tune their instruments, ready to play for their lord. Across towns and villages, silence gradually deepens, broken only by the sound of animals settling, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of a wolf. Candles burn low, shadows lengthen, and sleep comes. Life in the Middle Ages was a tapestry woven of work and rest, sorrow and joy, fear and hope. It was a world very different from ours, and yet deeply human. People loved, worried, prayed, and dreamed just as we do. As you imagine them now, may their stories bring you calm, and may the steady rhythm of their days ease you into rest. Let the firelight flicker softly in your mind, the quiet crackle soothing your thoughts. Imagine the weight of centuries fading into silence, the voices of the past speaking gently, reminding you that you are part of a long human story. The Middle Ages pass like a dream, and as you drift toward sleep, you carry with you the warmth of their hearts, the sound of their bells, and the peace of their night sky. Let us wander now into the narrow streets of a medieval town, where the sound of footsteps echoes on cobblestones, and the scent of fresh bread, tanned leather, and which smoke fills the air. Towns with a beating heart of craft and trade, places where people gathered not just to live, but to create. While most of Europe remained rural, towns gave rise to a different rhythm, one shaped by workshops, markets, and the hum of guilds. A guild was more than just an association of workers. It was a brotherhood, a family, and a protector. Bakers, weavers, blacksmiths, carpenters, and masons, each trade formed its own guild, setting rules for quality, training apprentices, and caring for members in times of need. Imagine stepping into the workshop of a medieval shoemaker. The air is thick with the smell of leather. Tools are arranged neatly on a bench, awls, knives, and wooden forms. The shoemaker bends over his work, hand skill from years of practice, stitching carefully so the shoe will last. Apprentices watch and learn, sweeping floors, fetching materials, dreaming of the day when they too will master craft. Becoming a master was a long journey. A boy might begin as an apprentice at the age of 12, working for years under a master in exchange for food, lodging, and training. When his skills grew, he became a journeyman, traveling from town to town, working for different masters and earning wages. Only after creating a masterpiece, a work that demonstrated skill and artistry, could he become a master himself, joining the guild as an equal. These guilds protected quality, but also gave dignity to work, ensuring that craft was valued as more than just labor. The marketplace was the center of town life. Imagine the square on a bustling day. Stalls set out with goods from near and far. A farmer from the countryside sells fresh vegetables, while a potter displays his jars and bowls. A cloth merchant shows bolts of wool, dyed in bright colors, while a spice seller offers tiny packets of cinnamon, pepper, and saffron, their aromas mixing in the air. Shouts of sellers and laughter of buyers echo among the buildings. For many, the market was a place to meet friends, hear news, and feel the pulse of the wider world. But life in towns was not without its difficulties. Streets were often narrow and crowded, with waste thrown from windows into open drains. Disease spread quickly in such close quarters, and fire could leap from one wooden house to another in moments. Yet despite the risks, towns grew, drawn by opportunity, trade, and the promise of freedom. For in some places, living in a town for a year and a day granted a serf freedom from feudal duties, a chance at a new life. Medicine in the Middle Ages was a blend of knowledge, tradition, and belief. Healing was guided by the theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness, it was thought, came from imbalances among them, and so treatments aimed to restore balance. A doctor might prescribe bleeding, using leeches or lancets to let excess blood flow, or he might recommend herbs. Chamomile for stomach troubles, lavender for rest, sage for fevers. Monks in monasteries tended gardens of healing plants, carefully recording their uses in herbals. But medicine was also bound to faith. Many believed illness came from sin or from the influence of the stars. Prayers, charms, and relics were part of healing alongside herbs and potions. Imagine a sick child in a village, a mother sitting beside him through the night. She places a cool cloth on his brow, murmurs prayers, and gives him broth steeped with herbs. The church bell tolls softly in the distance, reminding her that even in sickness, she is not alone. Sometimes the child recovered, sometimes not. Life was fragile, and medicine could only do so much. The greatest shadow of illness was the plague. In the 14th century, the Black Death swept across Europe, killing millions. Villages emptied, fields lay untended, and fear gripped every heart. Some believed it was punishment from God, others that it was carried by foul air. People wore masks filled with herbs, lit fires to purify the air, or carried charms for protection. Yet despite the terror, communities endured. In time, the plague passed, leaving behind scars but also resilience. From that suffering came changes. Labor became more valuable, peasants demanded more freedom, and society slowly shifted. Beyond the practical and the fearful, the Middle Ages were full of imagination. Myths, legends, and folklore shaped how people understood the world. Dragons, giants, and fairies were believed to dwell in forests and mountains. Ghosts were said to walk at night, and witches were whispered about in hushed tones. Stories of King Arthur and his knights spread far and wide, blending history and myth into tales of honor and magic. In every village, folk tales explain the mysteries of nature. Why the seasons changed, why storms came, why crops failed or flourished. Imagine a winter's night in a small cottage. Snow lies thick outside, and the wind rattles the shutters. Inside, a family gathers by the fire. A grandmother tells a story of a knight who fought a dragon, or of a spirit that walked the forest. The children listen wide-eyed, half frightened, half delighted, as the flames flicker shadows on the walls. These stories were not just entertainment. They carried lessons, warnings, and hope. They bound generations together, weaving imagination into daily life. Crafts were everywhere in this world. The mason carved stone for cathedrals, each chisel marked part of a greater whole. The weaver created cloth, thread by thread, on a loom that clacked steadily. The potter shaped clay into vessels that held food and drink, his hands steady and practiced. These crafts gave dignity and purpose, creating beauty out of necessity. Imagine the soaring arches of a cathedral, stone carved with angels, saints, and flowers. Each stone was cut by hand, lifted by human effort, placed with precision. To stand within such a place was to feel the awe of both faith and human skill. Even the smallest objects told stories of craft. A wooden spoon, polished smooth from years of use. A simple brooch, worn proudly on a peasant's cloak. A carved chest, holding the treasures of a household. These objects were not just tools. They were companions in daily life, shaped by human hands, touched by care. Let us turn now to the rhythms of time itself. In a world without clocks as we know them, people measured time by the sun, the bells, and the seasons. Dawn began with the crowing of roosters, and work followed the rising sun. Noon was marked by the ringing of the church bell, calling people to prayer. Evening came with vespers, and the day closed with sleep soon after nightfall. The year was marked by sowing, growing, harvesting, and resting. Each season brought its tasks. Spring for planting, summer for tending, autumn for gathering, winter for mending and waiting. Life moved slowly, steadily, in harmony with nature. At night, when the world grew quiet, people often feared the dark. Without lamps or electricity, darkness was deep, broken only by the glow of the hearth or the pale light of the moon. Thieves, wolves, and spirits were all feared in the night. Yet night also brought rest, dreams, and silence. Imagine lying on a straw mattress, wrapped in blankets, listening to the crackle of the dying fire. Outside, the stars shine bright, the air crisp and still. In that silence, sleep comes gently, as it always has across centuries. The seasons shape not only work, but also moods. Spring brought hope, new growth in the fields, lambs in the meadows, blossoms on the trees. Summer was a time of labor, but also of warmth, laughter, and festivals. Autumn was both bounty and anxiety. Would the harvest be enough to last the winter? Winter was hardest, with cold, scarcity, and long nights, yet it also brought closeness, as families gathered indoors, telling stories and singing songs to pass the time. Through all this, faith remained a constant thread. The church taught not only prayers, but also the meaning of suffering, joy, and hope. Saints were revered as protectors, their relics carried in processions, their stories retold as inspiration. Pilgrims traveled far to touch their shrines, to seek healing or forgiveness. Faith gave answers to mysteries, and even when questions remained, it gave people the courage to endure. Now imagine yourself walking through a medieval fair. Bright banners flap in the wind, stalls display goods, and jugglers perform to gather crowds. A man plays a tune on a pipe, while acrobats tumble nearby. Children dart through the crowd, laughing, while merchants shout their wares. A nobleman rides through on horseback, his cloak bright with color, while peasants cheer or bow. The fair was a time when all gathered together, where the ordinary mixed with the extraordinary, and where the world felt larger, brighter, and full of possibility. The Middle Ages were not only about survival, but also about wonder. Cathedrals rose like mountains of stone, filled with light and color. Artisans carved angels, painted saints, and composed music that still echoes today. Though life was hard, people reached always for beauty, for meaning beyond the ordinary. And in reaching, they left behind a legacy of faith, art, and stories that still speak to us. As this story continues, let the images settle in your mind. The shoemaker in his workshop, the market square filled with color, the healer gathering herbs, the grandmother telling stories by the fire. Each scene is part of the great tapestry of the Middle Ages, threads woven together into a world both fragile and strong. As you listen, may these gentle stories calm your thoughts, easing you into rest, reminding you that across time, people have always sought comfort, joy, and peace in the rhythms of daily life. Let us walk now along the winding roads of the medieval world. Travel was slow, often by foot or on horseback, yet the roads were alive with movement. Merchants carried goods to markets. Pilgrims walked with staffs and satchels toward holy shrines. Messengers rode swiftly with letters sealed in wax, while armies marched in long columns, their banners fluttering in the wind. Though most villagers lived their lives close to home, travel was not unknown, and the roads carried stories, news, and change. For pilgrims, the journey was more than physical, it was spiritual. Imagine a group of men and women walking together, their shoes worn thin, their cloaks dusty, yet their hearts full of purpose. They carry badges showing where they are bound. Scallop shells for Santiago de Compostela in Spain, a simple cross for Canterbury in England, keys for Rome. Along the road they pass inns and hospices, where monks and nuns offer bread, soup, and rest. At night they gather by fires, telling stories of their lives, singing hymns, and encouraging one another. The road is long, but each step is a prayer, a movement toward forgiveness, healing, and hope. Merchants, too, travel far. Wool from England, wine from France, spices from the East, all moved across roads and seas. Picture a caravan of wagons rumbling along a dusty road, guarded by men with spears, for robbers lurked in forests. In their cargo are bolts of cloth dyed in rich hues, sacks of grain, barrels of wine, and small packets of saffron and cinnamon, treasures that will sell for fortunes. The marketplace in a distant town awaits their arrival, ready to bargain, ready to marvel at goods from lands most will never see. Travel also brought danger. Roads were rough, full of mud and stones, bridges scarce, and then sometimes untrustworthy. Bandits preyed on the unwary, and storms could leave travelers stranded. Yet the pull of the road was strong, for it connected people, widened horizons, and carried whispers of a larger world. Along these same roads, armies also moved. The clash of steel, the thunder of horses, the cry of men. War was never far in the Middle Ages. Castles were built not just for grandeur but for defense, their walls designed to withstand siege. Imagine a castle under attack. Arrows fly from the battlements. Stones crash from catapults, while below, soldiers dig trenches and raise ladders. Inside the castle walls, defenders pour boiling water or pitch on attackers, praying for deliverance. War was brutal, and its toll fell hardest on peasants, whose fields were trampled, homes burned, and families scattered. Yet even in war, there were moments of peace. Truces were called on holy days. Enemies sometimes shared bread or water when battles ceased at night. And from the chaos of war came stories of courage and honor. Knights swore oaths to protect the weak, though not all lived by that code. The idea of chivalry was an ideal, a light in a dark time, urging men to strive for something beyond violence. Romance, too, filled the medieval imagination. The poetry of troubadours told of courtly love, of knights who adored noble ladies, serving them with devotion, often from afar. These songs spoke of longing, sacrifice, and beauty, weaving dreams that soften the harshness of reality. Imagine a knight beneath a window, singing softly of his love, while the lady listens, bound by duty yet touched by the melody. Such love was not always real, but the idea of it shaped culture, inspiring poetry, music, and stories that endure. In ordinary life, love was more practical, yet no less meaningful. Peasants married for companionship, for survival, for the joining of families. Weddings were joyful, full of music, dancing, and feasting. A bride might wear her best dress, a wreath of flowers on her head, while guests shared bread, ale, and laughter. Children soon followed, bringing both joy and worry. Families were large, for survival depended on many hands, and though life was hard, love bound people together, giving warmth against the chill of uncertainty. As centuries passed, the world of the Middle Ages began to shift. Towns grew larger, trade richer, knowledge deeper. The printing press was invented, spreading books more widely than ever before. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 opened new routes and new questions. Voyages of discovery carried ships across seas once thought impassable. The old order of knights and castles began to fade, replaced by new powers, new ideas, and new horizons. Yet even as the Middle Ages ended, the lives of ordinary people still moved with the same rhythms: planting and harvest, prayer and festival, birth and death. Imagine now a great cathedral, nearly complete after centuries of building. Its towers rise above the town, bells tolling across the fields. Stained glass windows glow with sunlight, painting colors on the stone floor. Inside, the air is cool and hushed, the murmur of prayers echoing. Every stone has been shaped by hands now long gone, every window painted with care. It is both a monument of faith and a monument to human endurance, a reminder of what could be built when generations share the same dream. Beside the cathedral, life goes on. A baker kneads dough, his arms strong from years of work. A child chases a hoop down the street, laughing as it rolls. A woman draws water from the well, greeting her neighbor with a smile. These small moments, unnoticed by history, were the fabric of medieval life. For all the grandeur of kings and knights, it was the daily act of ordinary people that sustained the world. Let us pause to consider the senses of medieval life. The sounds, the ring of the church bell, the clatter of hooves on stone, the chatter of voices in the marketplace, the songs of birds in the fields. The smells, with smoke rising from chimneys, fresh bread baking, damp earth after rain, the sharp tang of tanned leather. The sights, the green of field in spring, the gray of stone walls, the bright colors of banners on feast days. The touch, the roughness of wool, the smoothness of polished wood, the warmth of a cloak on a winter night. To live, then, was to be immersed in a world of sensation, every moment tied to nature, to labor, to community. Travel, war, love, and change, all were part of this tapestry. The Middle Ages were not only a time of hardship, but also of endurance, creativity, and dreams. People prayed for peace, sang of love, built cathedrals that touched the sky, and told stories that still live in our imagination. As you rest tonight, picture yourself walking those medieval roads. Hear the crunch of gravel beneath your feet. See the fields stretching outward. Feel the cool air of morning on your face. Ahead lies a village, its cottages clustered around a church, smoke curling from chimneys. Children run to greet you, curious at your arrival. A farmer waves, pausing in his work. You step into the square, greeted by the warmth of life, the hum of voices, the rhythm of a world both old and alive. And as night falls in that village, the bells ring softly. Fires glow in hearths. Shadows dance on walls, and voices quieten into sleep. Above, the stars shine just as they do tonight, timeless and eternal. The Middle Ages fade into memory, but their stories remain, whispering across time, soothing, reminding us that life, though fragile, is always full of meaning. So let the gentle images of this world guide you deeper into rest. Let the sound of fire crackle in your mind, the glow of candlelight soften your thoughts, and the calm of centuries ease you into sleep. The Middle Ages have spoken their story, and now, in the quiet of the night, you may dream alongside them. Within the heart of the medieval world, the monastery stood as a beacon of order and devotion. Picture a vast stone complex, walls encircling gardens, cloisters, chapels, and dormitories. The life inside was quiet, ordered by the tolling of bells. Monks rose before dawn, their breath visible in the chill air, moving silently into the chapel to chant prayers. The sound of their voices, low and steady, filled the dark space with harmony, rising like incense into the rafters. The day unfolded in a rhythm of prayer, study, and work, each hour marked by devotion. Monks copied manuscripts in the scriptorium, the scratch of quills steady against parchment. The pages glowed with bright inks and gold leaf, turning words into art, ensuring that knowledge survived the centuries. In the garden, herbs grew, sage thyme, rosemary, used to heal the sick. Bees hummed among the flowers, their honey harvested for food and medicine alike. In the kitchens, bread baked slowly, filling the air with warmth. Silence was often kept, but silence was not emptiness. It was a vessel for thought, for devotion, for peace. Nuns, too, lived in convents, sharing the same discipline, the same dedication. Their voices rose in song. Their hands cared for the poor and the sick. Women found in the cloister a space of learning and purpose, where prayer mingled with compassion. They spun wool, wove cloth, and taught children to read, leaving traces of kindness that often went unrecorded, but were felt deeply in their communities. Beyond the monastery walls, minstrels and entertainers roamed. They were the carriers of song and story, their voices weaving threads of joy and wonder. Imagine a minstrel stepping into a village square, lute in hand, his cloak patched but his smile wide. Children gather at his feet. Adults lean in from doorways, and soon the air fills with melody. He sings of kings and battles, of love and betrayal, of faraway places and magical creatures. His songs bring laughter, sometimes tears, always a moment of escape. Jesters, with their bells and painted faces, follow noble courts, making lords and ladies laugh with clever tricks and sharp wit. These entertainers live by their words and their music, moving constantly, carrying with them the lifeblood of imagination. Children in the Middle Ages knew both play and labor. From an early age, they helped in fields, carried water, gathered wood, tended animals. Yet their laughter echoed across meadows. Their games filled the lanes. They played with wooden dolls, hoops, balls made of rags, and sticks shaped into swords. They chased each other through fields, climbed trees, sang songs, and invented stories. Their world was smaller than ours, yet their wonder was immense. A festival day was especially magical. Colors, music, sweet treats like honey cakes, and the thrill of staying awake past sunset, watching fires blaze against the night sky. As children grew, their paths diverged. A boy might learn a trade, apprentice to a blacksmith, carpenter, or weaver, working long hours to master craft. A girl might help her mother with cooking, weaving, or selling goods at market. Or, in wealthier families, she might learn to read, to write, to manage a household. Some children were sent to monasteries, dedicating their lives to faith. Others found themselves on harsher paths, serving in households, traveling with armies, or living in poverty. Childhood was shorter then, but the spark of joy, the light of curiosity, was the same as today. The passing of time was measured differently in the Middle Ages. There were no clocks as we know them. The day was divided by bells, by the rising and setting of the sun, by the changing of the seasons. Winter brought short days, long nights, and the warmth of hearths. Spring awakened fields, flowers, and hopes. Summer filled barns and markets with abundance, while autumn colored the land with gold and prepared it for rest. Life moved with these cycles, each season shaping the rhythm of labor and celebration. Feast days and festivals broke the routine. Villages erupted in joy with music, dancing, and games. Picture May Day celebration. A tall pole planted in the ground, ribbons flowing from its top as men and women dance in circles, weaving colors together. Tables are laden with bread, cheese, roasted meats, and ale. Laughter echoes through the air, and for a day, worries fade. On harvest festivals, communities gather to give thanks, offering the first fruits of their labor. At Christmas, the cold nights brighten with carols, fires, and gifts of food and warmth. These moments bound people together, giving joy amid hardship. In towns, guilds added to the fabric of life. A guild was more than a trade organization. It was a brotherhood, a community of mutual aid. Picture a guild hall, sturdy and warm, where carpenters or weavers met. Candles flicker, ale is poured, decisions are made. Apprentices learn from masters. Journeymen seek to prove their skill, and masters safeguard their craft. Guilds provided training, protected quality, and supported members in times of need. They organized festivals, carried banners and processions, and stood as pillars of urban life. In the countryside, villagers relied on each other just as strongly. Neighbors helped build barns, shared tools, and looked after one another in times of illness or loss. Though life was often hard, bonds of community softened its edges. Imagine a snowy night, a family gathered around the hearth, telling stories while the wind howls outside. The fire crackles, shadows flicker, and the sense of togetherness warms more than any cloak. The medieval world was also deeply aware of the natural world. The cycles of the moon guided planting. Stars were used for navigation. Animals had symbolic meaning. Lions for courage, lambs for innocence, owls for wisdom. Bestiaries, illustrated books of animals both real and imagined, were treasured. They included elephants and crocodiles described from travelers' tales, as well as unicorns and dragons, symbols of mystery and faith. To the medieval mind, nature was not separate from life, but woven into it, full of signs and lessons. Journeys of the spirit often took form in pilgrimages, but they could also be inward. Mystics spoke of visions, of moments where the soul felt close to the divine. A peasant might feel the same awe gazing at a field glowing in sunset, or hearing the bells echo across hills. Life was steeped in a sense of wonder, not only in grand cathedrals, but in simple, daily moments. Evenings often brought storytelling. Families and neighbors sat together, sharing tales of saints, of heroes, of local legends. Imagine an old man, his voice slow and steady, telling of a knight who battled a dragon, while children lean in wide-eyed. Or a grandmother telling stories of ancestors, of how the village came to be, her words stitching memory into identity. These stories passed wisdom, gave comfort, and kept the past alive. The night sky was also a source of endless wonder. Without modern lights, stars shone brilliantly. The Milky Way arched across the heavens, inspiring awe and questions. Constellations told stories. Orion the hunter, Draco the dragon, Cassiopeia the queen. Farmers read the sky for weather, sailors for guidance, dreamers for inspiration. Imagine lying in a meadow after a long day's work, gazing upward, the cool grass beneath, the vast sky above, the heart filled with both smallness and connection. And so the Middle Ages unfolded, days of labor, nights of wonder, years marked by change and endurance. Life was fragile, yet resilient. Hardships came, but so did joy. People built, created, believed, and loved. Though their world was different from ours, their hearts were not. The same longing for meaning for community, for beauty, live then as it does now. As you rest tonight, let the gentle rhythm of their days ease you. Imagine walking cloisters in silence, hearing chants echo in stone halls. Picture a minstrel song drifting across a village square, laughter mingling with melody. See children playing in the fields, their joy timeless. Feel the turning of seasons, the warmth of the hearth, the quiet of a starlit night. The Middle Ages speak softly still, inviting you to find calm, to dream, to rest. In the quiet villages and bustling towns of the Middle Ages, health was both a mystery and a daily concern. Sickness came suddenly, often without warning, and the tools to fight it were limited. Medicine was a blend of observation, tradition, and belief. Physicians studied the works of ancient masters like Galen and Hippocrates, learning of the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. To be healthy, these humors must be in balance, and when they were not, illness appeared. Treatments sought to restore harmony, bleeding to reduce excess, herbs to soothe or purge, diets to strengthen. Herbs were central to healing. In monastery gardens, rows of plants grew under careful care. Lavender for calming, mint for stomach aches, sage for strength, rosemary for memory, yarrow to stop bleeding. The knowledge of herbs was passed through generations, a blend of practice and prayer. Women often held this wisdom, tending families with poultices, teas, and oils. Midwives brought children into the world, their hands steady, their voices gentle, their knowledge rooted in experience more than books. Though they lacked our science, their care was real, their intentions deeply human. Illnesses spread quickly in close communities. Fevers, coughs, and wounds were constant threats. At times, greater plague struck, sweeping across lands with terrible force. The Black Death, in the 14th century, was the most feared. Imagine a village where bells toll day and night, where fear silences markets, where families pray for deliverance. The air feels heavy, the streets are quiet, and the uncertainty is deep. Yet even in such darkness, compassion shone. Priests tended the dying, neighbors shared food, and prayers rose in hope. The memory of those times lingered, shaping how people saw life, death, and faith. Superstition also guided daily life. The world was full of signs and omens, of unseen forces both kind and threatening. A sudden illness might be blamed on an ill-wishing glance, the so-called evil eye. To protect against it, charms were worn: a small cross, a sprig of herbs, a carved stone. A child might wear an amulet around the neck, believed to guard against sickness. Farmers looked to the phases of the moon, planting and harvesting by its light. Travelers carried tokens of safety: a saint's relic, a feather, a simple prayer whisper before setting out. Folklore filled the gaps between the known and unknown. Tales of fairies, spirits, and ghosts were shared by firelight. In dark forests, it was said, strange beings dwelled: elves who might lead wanderers astray, or spirits who guarded hidden treasures. By rivers, people told of water nymphs who sang to those passing by. The boundary between the natural and supernatural felt thin, and people walked carefully, showing respect to both land and unseen presences. These stories, while fanciful, gave meaning, warning, and wonder. They connected human life with mystery, with awe, with imagination. Legends of saints also spread, mixing faith with marvel. A saint might heal the sick with a touch, calm storms of prayer, or drive away demons. Their relics, bones, garments, even drops of blood, were treasured, carried in processions, placed in church altars. Pilgrims walked miles to see them, to pray before them, to ask for protection. Such journeys wove together faith, hope, and endurance, turning roads into rivers of devotion. Astrology also played its part in medieval thought. The stars and planets were believed to influence lives, guiding events on Earth. Physicians consulted the heavens before treating patients. considering the position on Mars or Venus before prescribing remedies. Farmers noted the stars for planting. Lovers looked for signs in the night sky, and kings consulted astrologers before battles. The sky above was both map and mystery, an ever-present guide. Even as superstition shaped life, practical knowledge grew quietly. Craftsmen learned to build stronger bridges, finer tools, sharper blades. Builders discovered ways to raise cathedrals higher, to carve stone more delicately, to let light pour through colored glass. Farmers experimented with crop rotations, improving harvests. Slowly, knowledge advanced, each step small, yet building toward great change. In villages, healers mixed prayer with herbs. In towns, physicians studied manuscripts, debated theories, and sought cures. In monasteries, monks observed nature, noting patterns, preserving texts. And in the minds of many, questions stirred. Was there more to learn, more to discover? Curiosity, though often restrained, was never fully silent. The daily life of people, meanwhile, continued with its own rhythm of care and caution. A mother soothed her child with chamomile tea. A farmer rubbed his aching hands with oil infused with sage. A shepherd whispered prayer when lightning split the sky. They lived between faith and fear, science and superstition, always striving to endure. And through all, stories kept them company. Imagine a winter's evening, snow piled outside, fire glowing within. A family sits close, while an elder speaks, of a hero who fought a beast, of a maiden who outwitted a king, of a saint who walked across water. The children listen wide-eyed. The fire flickers. The world outside fades. Stories explain what could not be explained, offering comfort, laughter, lessons, and dreams. As centuries turned, new winds began to blow. Trade with distant lands brought not only spices and silks, but ideas. From the great libraries of the East came texts of philosophy, mathematics, and science. Translation spread knowledge long hidden, and thinkers began to question, to explore. Art grew richer, more realistic. Music shifted, blending old chants with new harmonies. The Middle Ages, so often seen as static, were in truth a time of quiet transformation. A painter in Italy mixed colors with patience, shaping faces that seemed alive. A scholar in Spain translated ancient works, opening doors to new thought. A printer in Germany experimented with movable type, setting the stage for books to spread faster than ever before. A sailor dreamed of crossing unknown seas, seeking land beyond the horizon. Seeds of the future were planted in the soil of the Middle Ages, nourished by centuries of endurance and imagination. Yet for the people of the time, life remained immediate. To survive, to care, to pray, to love. They did not know they lived at the edge of change. They simply lived their days as best they could, finding meaning in work, faith in ritual, joy in song, and hope in the turning of seasons. So let's return in our minds to a quiet village. The night is cool, the stars bright. In one house, a family rests by the hearth. In another, a woman tends to a newborn, rocking gently, humming softly. In the church, a single candle flickers before a carved image of a saint. Across the fields, owls call in the dark, while sheep huddle together for warmth. Life is fragile, but life endures. The world breathes, calm and timeless. Let the rhythm of their days soothe you now. Imagine the scent of herbs drying a cottage, the sound of prayers in a stone chapel, the laughter of children chasing fireflies. Feel the quiet wonder of stories told in the glow of firelight, the comfort of rituals repeated, the mystery of stars above. The Middle Ages, with all their fears and hopes, hardships and joys, whisper softly across the centuries, inviting you into rest. And as you drift toward sleep, let those whispers carry you. The herbs, the stories, the chants, the laughter, all are threads in the great tapestry of human life, woven together, They cradle you gently, reminding you that you, too, are part of this endless pattern. The fire crackles, the bells toll, the stars shine, the world grows quiet. Rest comes, soft and deep, in the stillness of a medieval church. Art spoke when words fell silent. Walls glowed with paintings, ceilings shimmered with color, and statues stood as silent teachers. Most people could not read, but they could see, and so art became their book, their guide of faith and story. Frescoes told of creation, of saints, of heaven and hell. Stained glass windows caught the sun and broke it into fragments of jewel-colored light, filling dark stone spaces with brilliance. Each image was a message, a reminder of mysteries both feared and adored. Imagine stepping into such a church on a bright morning. Outside, the fields are simple, the cottages modest, but within, light floods the air in shades of sapphire, emerald, and ruby. Scenes unfold on glass. A saint healing the sick, an angel with wings outspread, a farmer offering bread. The air smells faintly of incense, the stone cool beneath your feet. In that moment, even the humblest soul feels connected to something vast, eternal, and wondrous. Sculpture also filled the medieval world. Cathedrals stood adorned with saints carved in niches, their faces calm, their hands raised in blessing. Gargoyles jetted from corners, their grotesque forms spouting rainwater, yet also warning of dangers unseen. Inside, altars gleamed with gilded panels, painted with care, each detail of prayer turned into form. In monasteries, manuscripts shone with delicate illumination, tiny flowers curling around letters, golden halos circling saints' heads. These books were treasures, each page the work of months, even years, carrying not just words but devotion itself. Music wove through life as surely as breath. In the monastery, chants rose, steady and solemn, voices blending in simple harmony. The sound was pure, timeless, a river of tone flowing through stone halls. Outside in villages, music was livelier. Fiddles, flutes, drums, and voices carrying songs of love, work, and joy. Minstrels played in squares, their melodies lifting spirits. Dances filled feast days, circles of people moving together, stamping feet, clapping hands, laughter ringing. Consider the lull of a medieval harp, its strings plucked gently by fingers worn yet graceful. The notes rise, delicate and clear, filling a hall with calm, or the steady rhythm of a drum guiding dancers in a summer festival. Music marked the seasons, solemn during Lent, jubilant at Easter, playful at harvest, caroling at Christmas. It carried memory, taught faith, and bound communities together. Architecture rose as a visible soul of the Middle Ages. Romanesque churches stood sturdy and heavy, with thick walls, small windows, and rounded arches. They felt like fortresses of faith, secure and strong. Later, Gothic cathedrals soared, their walls rising higher, their windows larger, their arches pointed upward like prayers. Flying buttresses carried weight outward, allowing spaces to open into light. The vaults overhead seemed to float, drawing eyes to heaven. Imagine walking beneath the vaulted ceiling of Notre Dame or Chartres. Your footsteps echo softly. Your gaze rises higher and higher, until you feel small beneath the immensity. The light through stained glass shifts with the passing sun, creating patterns that dance on stone. Candles flicker at altars, their flames tiny against the vastness, yet steady, eternal. The building itself becomes an act of devotion, stone and glass transformed into a hymn. Art and architecture were not only for the grand. In villages, wooden carvings decorated chapels, simple yet heartfelt. Painted panels told local stories, brightening humble spaces. Music was not confined to cathedrals, but lived in cottages, in taverns, in fields where shepherds played pipes for their flocks. Creativity flowed through every level of life, from majestic to modest, from gold leaf to rough wood, from grand choirs to a child song. As centuries passed, the art of the Middle Ages began to change. Faces and paintings grew more lifelike, figures more natural, landscapes more real. Artists studied the play of light, the depth of perspective, the shape of bodies. They sought to capture not just symbols, but life itself. Music, too, grew more complex, with harmonies intertwining, voices weaving together in polyphony. The seeds of the Renaissance were sprouting, though those who lived then did not see it as an age of transition, but simply as their own present. Yet for all the changes, the heart of medieval creativity remained the same: to bring meaning, to give beauty, to connect earth with heaven. A mason carving stone, a monk painting a letter, a musician plucking a lute, all carried the same intention: to honor life, to honor faith, to honor the mystery of existence. Consider now a craftsman at his bench, the smell of wood shavings around him, his hands shaping a small figure, the Virgin Mary. He works slowly, carefully, pausing to pray before each cut. He knows the figure will stand in his village church, that neighbors will kneel before it, that candles will flicker at its feet. His work is more than craft. It is service. His art will outlast him, speaking when he is gone, carrying devotion across generations. Or picture a scribe in scriptorium, his eyes weary in the dim light, his hand steady as he copies words onto vellum. He dips his quill, writes carefully, decorates an initial with curling vines and golden leaf. His labor is long, his back aches, yet he continues, for he believes each word is a gift for the future. His book may travel, may reach places he will never see, may comfort souls centuries after his own life ends. In this way, art was not vanity but offering. The beauty of medieval creativity lies in this very humility. Works were made not for personal fame, but for community, for faith, for shared life. Cathedrals rose from the work of generations, each stone laid by hands unknown, each window painted by artists forgotten. Yet together they created wonders that endure. Songs were sung by voices lost to time, yet their echoes linger in music today. In this, there is comfort, to know that life's labor, though small alone, becomes great when joined with others. To know that beauty can be born from patience, from care, from devotion. To know that the works of the past, though centuries old, still speak, still shine, still give peace. As you rest tonight, imagine yourself within such a cathedral. The air is cool, scented with faint incense. Candles glow softly, their flame steady. Above, colored light filters down, painting your face in hues of blue and red. The silence is vast, but not empty. It holds prayers, songs, centuries of breath. You walk slowly, your footsteps quiet, your heart calm by the immensity, the beauty, the peace. Or picture yourself in a small village hall where music fills the night. Fiddles play, voices sing, feet move in joyful rhythm. You join the circle, hands linked, laughter bubbling, your body light with motion. Around you, neighbors smile, children clap, elders watch with contentment. The music lifts you, the joy carries you, the night wraps you in warmth. Art, music, architecture, all were ways the Middle Ages gave shape to their longing, their hope, their faith. And those centuries have passed. That longing remains familiar, for we too seek beauty, meaning, and connection. We too turn to song, to story, to creation, to find solace. In their works, we find ourselves. And so, as the world quiets, let these images settle into your mind. The glow of stained glass, the sound of chant, the weight of stone walls, the lightness of dance. Let them drift through your thoughts like soft smoke, calming, soothing, steady. The Middle Ages, with all their art and music, invite you to rest, to dream, to find peace in the timeless rhythm of human creativity.